What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the world's strongest man, the Mark Henry story that aired after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view this past Sunday on the network. And it's another great documentary from WWE. We've had a lot of these in recent months. One with Nigel McGuinness right after, I think, the TakeOver Liverpool or the TakeOver Blackpool show back in January. Now this one. Mark Henry was just inducted into the Hall of Fame about a year ago, so it's still pretty timely. And I enjoyed this quite a bit overall, and I have not seen enough people talking about it since Sunday, so wanted to shed some light on it with my review here on Network and Chill. So they kick off the special with Mark Henry, showing Mark Henry in the Busted Open radio show, which he has since taken up since retiring from the ring about a year or two ago. So he's been on this Busted Open radio show ever since. And that leads him into the intro when he talks about always trying to outdo himself as a kid, growing up, knowing his own strength, and he always wanted to kind of set that bar for himself. And he always felt like the strongest man to ever live, but he just had to prove it. So his school had a powerlifting team because of him, and it kind of felt like breathing to him. It came to him that easily. By the age of 21, he had broken many powerlifting records, and he went on to compete in the 1992 Olympic Games within record time. He was that impressive at that young of an age. And even his town of Silsbee, where he grew up and raised, and that's where he's billed from in wrestling. His town of Silsbee, his hometown of Silsbee, raised money so he could train for the Olympics, which goes to show how well liked and how beloved Mark Henry was and still is to this day. But he just didn't want to let people down. He wanted to succeed to show them that he was every bit as strong and every bit as had that every bit as much potential as they thought that as they saw in him. So he didn't want to let him down. So, Terry Todd was the like a father figure to Mark Henry. He helped train Mark Henry, helped him get into the Olympics. He was there every step of the way. I think he only passed away last year. He looked older in this footage from the 90s, but apparently he didn't pass away until just 2018 because a graphic aired for him at the end of the special. He was basically the father figure to Mark Henry that Mark did not have growing up. He was very close to his mom, who passed away in around 2000, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I don't know what happened to Mark's father. He might have mentioned it here, but he didn't really talk about his father all too much. But basically, his father was not there when he grew up. And he shared all of his moments in powerlifting and everything that he went through in his route to the Olympics. He shared all of his moments with this man, Terry Todd, who we looked at as a fatherly figure. So he qualified for the 1996 games in Atlanta, the 1996 Olympic Games, and that was when Vince called him for a job in WWE. And Mark was already a fan of wrestling. He was already a wrestling fan. He was already a fan of the WWE. And he felt like a Mark talking to him on the phone. Like, oh, can I work with The Undertaker and all this other stuff. So he met with Vince in Stamford, which is where he touched Andre's boot in Vince's office. And he scored himself a huge contract. Like one of the biggest contracts in WWE up to that point. Because of his name value from the Olympics. And again, he didn't want to fail. He did not want to let WWE down. He didn't want to let anyone down. So he felt a lot of pressure when he first signed with WWE in 1996. And he signed a huge-ass 10-year contract. A 10-year deal with WWE. But he had to prove himself, though, because there was a lot of people that thought he wouldn't do well. And, he had his fair share of detractors. And he was one of those people that people backstage, fellow wrestlers, thought that he just had everything handed to him because he had this huge-ass contract despite not having a background in wrestling. So he had to prove all those people wrong on his way to the top in WWE. So he had that animosity with other wrestlers that he eventually worked over by having, by proving himself as being a reliable worker and being a good guy and all this other stuff. Unfortunately, he failed to medal during the Olympics in 1996 due to suffering an injury, and suffering injuries has kind of been Mark Henry's thing over the last 20 years, unfortunately. In his first year in WWE, he broke his ankle. He had surgery on his knee and then surgery on his other knee. So all these injuries started to pile up and he had to take time off. And once that shit was out of the way, that was when, according to Mark Henry, that was when he started to flourish, around late 1997, early 98. So he returned to the ring in December of 1997, and soon after he was excited to join the Nation of Domination alongside Farouk, The Rock, and D'Lo Brown and The Godfather. He thought it was a great group, a great concept, and that was where he could really start to develop a personality for himself. And it gave Henry a lot of confidence as a character, because up to that point he had very little confidence in himself. And he said it was the best thing that could have ever happened to him was joining the Nation of Domination. He also called The Rock a pretty big influence on his career, and from there he did the program with China and doing the vignettes with her and going on a date with her and all this other stuff. And that was when he really started to develop a personality for himself and really come into his own, come out of his shell as a character. And he said he did the best with whatever he was asked to do, whether it was having sex with Mae Young or doing this shit with China or giving birth to a hand, or that was Mae Young, and that kind of tied into that shit. Doing the sexual chocolate stuff. He made the most of everything he was involved in. He was the quintessential sports entertainer in that respect. And he made a lot of it gold, too. Some of it wasn't that great, but most of it was very entertaining. And Mark Henry was the one to credit for that. And the Mae Young stuff just became historic. And he talked about it here. He said, I want to have birth to a hand. Vince told Mark. And Mark's like, what are you talking about? She's going to give birth to a hand. What are you talking about? He's like, it's a hand. That's why it's funny. Yeah. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? So yeah, he started laughing about that, and Mark Henry had no idea what was going on. He talked about how sexual chocolate always had TV time back in the Attitude Era, but it wasn't enough to get him by because his in-ring work was still lacking. So he went to OVW in 2000 to kind of work on that type of stuff. And he realized at that point, during his time down in developmental, that there was so much that he didn't know. And during which point his mother passed away, so he was pretty down on himself. Vince told him to take all the time off that he needed. But Mark Henry found that the best way to cope with his mom's death, who he was really close with, as I mentioned earlier, was to train. So he just kept training and training and training. And he wanted to compete again in the World's Strongest Man competition to, prove to those who doubted him that his strength was every bit as powerful as he said it was, that he indeed was the world's strongest man. And Vince allowed him to do it, but under one caveat. He goes, yeah, I'll allow you to do this. And, he doesn't have to allow Mark to go out and do these competitions. But he goes, yeah, I'll let you do the Arnold Classic, in February of 2002. I'll allow you to do it, but just know that I don't have a place in my company for the world's second strongest man. So he was like, oh shit, that's a real challenge. And Mark all of a sudden didn't have as much confidence in himself. He's like, there's a chance I might not be as strong as I think I am. But despite that, he took part in the Arnold Classic. He took part in that in February 2002. Spent 3 months training for it. Set a world record for lifting 365 pounds 3 times in a row during the Arnold Classic. Did really, really well. Improved himself as the world's strongest man once again. So he returned to WWE that March, in the March of 2003. And they kind of show a montage of all of his moments in the years that followed, which he didn't do a lot from 03 to 08, but he did have a few accomplishments, including becoming the ECW champion and all these other things. But it really was not until 2011 that a switch went off within inside of Mark Henry, that he became much more intense and aggressive in this all-new man. And Bleacher talked about how Mark put a lot of pressure on himself at that point, and how he was really, really pissed during that Hall of Pain run. That Henry was just flat out angry. He was legitimately angry, and that all that aggression that we saw on TV was real. And he worked with Big Show a lot, so Big Show would know. He worked with Big Show a lot during that time period. And Mark Henry was absolutely determined to prove himself as the best in all of WWE. He felt underappreciated, which is what led him to winning the World Heavyweight Championship and Night of Champions 2011, having a great 3-month run as champion. A couple years later, he got inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame, which I think was in early 2013. And then he became a global ambassador for the company after kind of stepping away from the ring on a full-time basis after like 2015, 2016. Big Show said you can't help but love the guy, and Mark Henry said he prides himself on being a big brother type and, being a role model to other people. They also showed here, which is what I was really happy to see, they showed his promo, his retirement promo, quote-unquote, from June of 2013, where he prepared himself to retire for real, only to fool everybody, including the Big Show, and D'Lo Brown, who texted him like, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear you retired, all this other stuff. Then they texted him like, dude, you son of a bitch, you got us all with that promo on Raw this week. It was awesome. It was a great moment. And then he left Vince's office that same day or around that time with a 5-year deal. So that means that his deal would have expired in 2018, but he must have re-signed under like an ambassador deal, unless he didn't re-sign, I'm not sure. But he did go into the Hall of Fame in 2018, though. So maybe his deal expired soon after. But he got inducted into the 2018 WWE Hall of Fame, and he said now he has a strong sense of belonging in being a member of the Hall of Fame. Big Show said he cried when he found out that Mark Henry said that he was the one that Henry chose to induct him into the Hall of Fame. He was really, honored to have been accepted as the person that Mark Henry wanted to induct him into the Hall of Fame. He was really happy to hear that and be that person. And Mark Henry said, I could not look at that Hall of Fame ring without getting emotional. It really meant a lot to me. And he hugged Vince backstage, and he was really happy about the whole thing, and he had a great induction speech, and everyone was really happy for him. It was a great moment for Mark Henry. He said it was really honorable to be a part of that group, and my children, despite everything that I accomplished in the ring and WWE and beyond, my children will always be my legacy, which was a great quote to end on here. And he talked about, being an inspiration for other athletes and his own kids and other people, and he said, it's a hard life, but it's worth it, and being the world's strongest man. So, this was a great special overall. Didn't really learn much about Mark Henry that I didn't already know, but it was a very good story overall. He's a real good guy. I had the chance to meet Mark Henry a few years back, and he's a really, really cool guy. But, I enjoyed this a lot. This was a really, really good documentary. Runs about an hour long, so when you get the chance, check it out on the WWE Network. And, really enjoyable stuff covering his entire time in WWE and beyond, so be sure to check it out on the network at your leisure. With all that being said, guys, be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. I'll be back in my next Network and Shield reviewing the next edition of Total Bella's Season 4, Episode 6, I believe, that airs this Sunday on the network. The video should be up on Monday or Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. Beyond that, guys, just have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Hopefully I can get over this cold in the next couple of days so my voice can go back to being normal. And I'll catch your ass down the road.